Joining us now is journalist and author Ryan Grim, who's actually out with a brand new book, The Squad, AOC and the Hope of a Political Revolution. Ryan, this book was a pleasure to read.
I love to hear you say that. That's really music to my ears.
Yeah, you're a great writer.
It might not be a happy story necessarily, but I want people to like just enjoy the experience of reading it.
Oh, for sure, and I did, and I found the book incredibly enlightening because as you read through it, you're inevitably going to be reminded of so many controversial moments in, the Democratic Party in which there was division among the progressive wing and the more establishment wing. But learning about what was going on behind the scenes in those moments was so important for me, at least. It helps me have a better understanding about AOC, the Squad, and where things might have, for lack of a better word, gone wrong. Because I think we had a certain vision for them or of them, and it didn't really jive with reality.
Yeah. Right, if you sort of like reverse engineer it, go back through it like you were talking about, and if you see it unfolding, day to day, week to week, month to month, from their perspective, but with our kind of vantage point looking back, you see like, oh, I see where we were wrong in our perceptions of and our hopes of where this was gonna go. I see some decisions that could have been made differently, but I also see the way that this all coincided in such a haphazard way that it was kind of destined to unfold the way it did in some ways.
You're so right. Okay, so I want to go through all of it. So let's actually start off in the beginning, and it's actually where you begin your book, right? In 2015 with Bernie Sanders launching his presidential campaign. And in that portion of the book, what was very evident to me and what you kind of weave in and out in your storytelling was this tension between identity politics and the economic populism that Bernie Sanders represented. And so can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like Bernie had difficulty striking the appropriate balance in 2016, and then I think he went too far in 2020. AOC in her campaign appeared to strike the right balance between identity and economic populism. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and because Bernie was kind of caught off guard. And whenever he would get hit on it, and I have a scene where he got protested, he goes out, and it's actually interesting to remember. So he goes out, it's 2016, end of 2015, early 2016, and he's doing a rally in Seattle. And so he needs some elected official to come out, but basically nobody has endorsed him. And Pramila Jayapal is out there, who's known as a progressive. She's running for Congress at the time, but she hadn't quite endorsed him yet because she was like, I have some concerns. Where are you on guns? Where are you? She lists a couple things. I think race was one of them. What's your criminal justice platform? But I like him, and that was enough. Like, okay, you're speaking. We don't have anybody who has even endorsed. She's like, but I haven't endorsed yet. He's like, that's fine. So they speak. He gets interrupted. One of the multiple times he gets interrupted by Black Lives Matter protesters. They grab the mic, and it's outrageous that you haven't done X, Y, and Z. So then afterwards they go to a bar, him, Jane, Pramila Jayapal, and he's just kind of stewing. And you can just see it, just like, don't they know what I did in the 1960s?
Right.
Like I marched with, with Reverend King. I did all the housing desegregation work that I did in Chicago. And you can imagine how somebody who feels like they have been involved in this their whole life would react to that. And somebody like him who has that much pride does not like getting pushed. And she was like, look, that's great. And you should lean into that, talk about it. But that's the 1960s. Like you gotta update that a little bit. And he works on updating it at that point. But then Hillary Clinton sees her opening.
Yes, can I read an excerpt from your book?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I thought I see this happening with the Democratic Party all the time, weaponizing race, identity, all of that stuff. So Grimm writes in his book, when Hillary Clinton in Nevada in February of 2016 finally recast Sanders' critique of the big banks as a way for him to avoid confronting racism, the Democratic voting base had been primed for the attack as a reasonable one. And that attack is that Bernie Sanders doesn't care about social justice, he doesn't care about race-related issues, which is so funny to me because it's really the other way around. What mainstream Democrats, corporate Democrats like to do is lean into culture war issues to avoid having a real discussion about the bread and butter topics.
Yeah.
So she kind of flipped it and used it to her advantage to kind of try to destroy Sanders.
Yeah, she had this incredible way of framing it where she called him a single issue candidate. And the single issue is like economics and class and like how well you're doing materially in your life. And most people are like, that's not what I think of when I think of the word single issue, because it's, what are the other issues beyond that? And then she's like, then she says, will breaking up the banks end racism? Would breaking up the banks end sexism? And then she's like, but I would break up the banks if I have to, of course. Like, I'm not saying I won't break up the banks, but would it end racism? And you could be like, actually.
Yeah, exactly, actually.
Actually, redlining was one of the instruments by which we like implanted white supremacy at an intersection of oppression.
Yes. Yep.
But it wasn't a serious question, so you can't come back with like a serious critique. It's just her way of saying he is not actually that progressive because he doesn't take seriously these other concerns. And so yeah, she primed the audience to be ready for him to see him as some type of a retrograde Bernie bro,
Do you think, that trick that's been used over and over again by corporate Democrats against progressives has kind of led to what we're experiencing today, in which you do have some students on college campuses, progressive students on college campuses, like refusing to condemn Hamas, for instance, referring to Hamas as freedom fighters. And then of course they get branded as anti-Semites for doing this. And they don't care, like they don't care at all. They keep engaging in these types of protests. Is it because the effectiveness of that type of labeling, right? Whether it's racist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, it's kind of lost its luster and power? I think
for some people, they have been called kind of racist, extremist, sexist, anti-Semitic, whatever, so many times cynically that they stop hearing the critique. And so sometimes some of them behave in ways that are genuinely described as that. But there's no mechanism left to call them out on it.
It's amazing.
Nobody has the tools anymore. Because it's like, no, actually that is anti-Semitism. Like what you just said, that's anti-Semitism. Like it is, or that's racist. Like what you just, and like, well, you said that when I was opposed to the occupation in the West Bank, and you said that was anti-Semitism. So why am I supposed to listen to you? The undermining of the ability to call that out is one of the kind of collateral consequences of this. And just doubles up the cynicism, because not only are you weaponizing this in order to get it in the way of a movement that's trying to improve people's material conditions, you're also worsening the very things that you claim and that you're using to make them better.
That's such a good point.
It's awful.
No, I totally agree. It is awful. All right,
like the ADL now. Like
yes. So
when the ADL tells Elon Musk after like a rabidly anti-Semitic post, and then he condemns Palestinians and like bans From the River to the Sea or whatever from his site, and the ADL is like, you're good then, cool, all right. I know, it is amazing, right? Then if the ADL can't call out anti-Semitism anymore because they've lost all their credibility, you're gonna have more anti-Semitism. And their ability to label people as anti-Semites, again, loses its power because of the fact that they're willing to provide cover for someone like Musk. It's important to have those institutions that can have credibility.
Yes, that can be trusted, absolutely. Okay, so since we're kind of talking about Israel a little bit, let's get into it in regard to AOC, because as you detail in your book, there was the first moment AOC's confidence was pierced was during an interview with Margaret Hoover on the topic of Israel. And it's interesting because what AOC said in the context of that interview was so incredibly mild, especially considering some of the stuff we're hearing today. Totally fine, and so detail that and what that, I think that was what kind of set the trajectory for AOC kind of going closer and closer to ingratiating herself with like the mainstream Democrats. I'll make my case after you kind of describe that conversation and how it all went down. Yeah,
so June 26th is when she wins her primary against Joe Crowley. And it very quickly becomes clear, on that night, everybody thinks Joe Crowley losing is the big story. Like within days, people realize, oh no, Joe Crowley is going to be a footnote. He's going to be the trivia question of who did AOC beat. It becomes very clear that she's the real news from that night. She's doing every interview. She's crushing the interviews. She's eventually even like getting late night requests, which is just there's never been not even a freshman yet getting on the late night show. Like that just doesn't happen. And so they're saying yes to absolutely everything. So they say yes to this Margaret Carlson firing line interview. At the very end of the interview, she's like, I want to pick up something that you said back in May 2018 during the Great March of Return, which people have gone back now and re-examined because it was this civil society-led nonviolent protest in Gaza that Hamas eventually endorsed it under pressure from Gazan civil society, but this was not their idea. It was not the way that they wanted to approach it. Every Friday, people would meet, they would picnic, and then they'd have a peaceful march to the fence, look out at the land that their grandparents and parents used to live on, and then kind of march back. Eventually, IDF starts shooting at them, and the UN counted some ungodly number of injuries and deaths as a result of this. So after one of them, they killed like 37 people in a day. And AOC posts during the campaign, during the primary, silence is complicity. If 37 unarmed protesters were killed anywhere else in the world, if it was in Ferguson, if it was in Puerto Rico, we would stand up. This is unacceptable. And she gets asked about that. And she's like, I was just looking at it from a human rights lens, right? Like, if it happened in Puerto Rico, I would condemn it. If it happened in Ferguson, I'd condemn it. It happens in Gaza, I'd condemn it. And you can see like, she's like, uh-oh. Like right away, she's like, uh-oh. And then you see Margaret Carlson's like, what's your view on the Israel-Palestine question? Like just a wide open question.
Disaster,
It's like, okay. She's like, well, I see it through the lens of an activist and the human rights and the conditions and the occupation of Palestine. She's like, you just said the occupation of Palestine. What do you mean by that? And then she's like, because she's like, and you can see in her mind, like, did I just step on a landmine or not? Because you know that there's third rails in this issue. Did you? And she's like, well, I just mean the conditions and the occupation. Like, then she taps out. Like, I'm not an expert.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I actually remember that in the headlines. I also remember various other instances in which she was asked about foreign policy. It's really not her wheelhouse, and it's not where she's the most comfortable.
And she said, like, at my Bronx dinner table, it wasn't something we talked about. Summerlee told me the same thing. She's like, even in the Pittsburgh Assembly, the Pennsylvania Assembly, where she served, she's like, we didn't talk about this. Like, it's not an issue. That for us, like, she saw it also just as a civil rights issue.
So the thing that stood out to me about that moment was it did pierce her confidence. But then after that, I just think her confidence overall was just so damaged. She was so worried, based on your writing, about being accepted, which is so different from what I previously thought about her. I thought of her as someone who was, chosen by the Justice Democrats, propped up by the Justice Democrats because of her anti-establishment, messaging, because of the fact that she kind of wanted to come in and fight against the corruption, but that is not who she is. And I didn't realize that. She's actually someone who doesn't like conflict. She's someone who actually wanted to work with people to affect change, which, I think that's a naive way of looking at things, but tell me more about that. Tell me more about what sets her apart from what I think most progressive voters thought she would be.
Yeah, and I think she also had this 24/7 kind of right-wing Fox-driven like echo chamber, just telling lies and just attacking her constantly as this, like her name ID was higher among Republicans the first like year and a half than it was among Democrats because of this. And she's getting attacked as this puppet of Soros, because the Fox audience hasn't heard of Justice Democrats, so they have to say Soros. So she's a Soros puppet. She's always getting called stupid, which I thought was like so idiotic on their part. Like she's a very smart person, like very savvy, sophisticated, smart person. Like just clearly, like whether you like her or not, she's smart. But constantly getting called an idiot on television by these Fox News hosts who are themselves mostly idiots.
Yeah, totally.
So, which has got to be even harder. Like this idiot is calling me stupid. Oh my God. Yeah, you don't have the IQ of a Jesse Waters, like my God.
No, it's and look, it's brutal, especially when you're a young, beautiful woman, the stereotypes surrounding that, and so you're very conscious of it. Like I can imagine how difficult that was.
And so, on the one hand, she wants to prove that she's a serious person. You know, that she's there to legislate, that she's there, you know, to make change, but to do it in a way that kind of they like you said, they accept her. Corbin Trent, who became her communications director for the first 6 months, and then left in not great fashion, kind of Pelosi basically like get rid of these people.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So, was he and Shoykar Chakrabarti fired?
Corbin basically was. Now he stayed on with the campaign, and so firings in the political world are not the same as firings in like a corporate world. Well, actually, there's some corporate worlds where it's like you're fired, but actually we're going to keep you on as a consultant because it's better that way for everybody. And so that it was more one of those for Corbin. Shoykar, I think he could sense that it was just time to, it was time to wrap it up. Like they had kind of hit a wall. That's her chief of staff at the time. But so, and he pointed out, I can't remember if I put this in the book or not. I think I did. At the end of her first year or her first term, she put out like a 2-minute video of like her accomplishments. And from Corbin's perspective, like her major accomplishments, putting the Green New Deal on the map and making climate change like a central thing for the Democratic Party that they could no longer avoid before, calling out corruption, like reshaping the way that a huge base of voters understands the Democratic Party and taking the fight to them. Like that's what he would list as her achievements. Her 2-minute video included a little bit on the Green New Deal, but was a 2-minute huge like list of legislative accomplishments. Like it's some like ones that and all of them are meaningful to some people. Like she got, for instance, like $10,000 during, I guess this would have been later, but she got $10,000 for funeral expenses for people who died of COVID.
Oh, wow, okay.
And her district was hit hardest of any district in the country. So like that is a thing that like matters to real people. But from Corbin's perspective, he's like, we're trying to lead a political revolution here. That's great, and you can do that on the side. But like the thing that we should be really focused on is like messing these people up and like taking over.
When did the miscommunication happen? Because that's not what she wanted to do. That's not what she wanted to engage in, right? And so how did that get lost between them? Because I didn't know either. I would have thought that she was a fighter. She came in as a fighter, and it's the establishment that kind of beat her down or beat her to submission. But no, it turns out that she didn't want to be in conflict with them from the beginning.
She has those, like she has the Bernie politics. She worked extremely hard for Bernie Sanders. So it wasn't just a couple door knocking. Like that was like a huge passion for us during the campaign. Helped set up the campaign office in in the Bronx. And then she went, and she was a big TYT watcher. And I think partly, TYT was doing a lot of coverage of the Keystone XL, protests.
Right.
She went to Standing Rock, and while she was in Standing Rock, and she saw the like passion of the water protectors and others there. That's when she decided, like, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. And her brother had nominated her for this Justice Democrats thing, so her passion was real. And then at that time she's one of 435. Like that was their plan. They're gonna have in every single House race across the country, they're gonna run a populist candidate, whether Republican or Democrat. And it was only a year into that the whole thing is falling apart. And they have like 6 that are maybe viable, because they didn't recruit Ilhan and Rashida. They had their own political careers before, same with Ayanna. So then they all threw their eggs into AOC. It was kind of a marriage of convenience.
I gotta ask you, since you mentioned TYT and AOC watching it, there was a moment in your book where you talk about how, someone working for Crowley's team, Lauren French, kind of brushed off something one of her friends said at a dinner. One of her friends was like, oh, there's a lot of enthusiasm about this Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What do you think about that? And French just brushed it off and said, she'll get 10% of the vote and a job at the Young Turks.
Yes.
So my question is, how is Lauren French doing? How's our homegirl doing? What is she doing? What is she doing with her life?
She said she was gonna go into the private sector. She didn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, actually she might have by now. She went to work for Ben Ray Lujan, you know, the former DCCC chair.
Shocking that she did that. Yeah.
We could Google it. I haven't.
Well, we did Google her and we learned that she is obsessed with spearfishing.
Oh, cool.
One of her
Spearfishing's
favorite things.
cool.
I agree to disagree. It's not my thing.
I mean, I've never done it, but it seems cool.
I don't know. I've seen someone engage in it. I did not like it.
Are you going to offer her a job at the Young Turks?
I mean,
because we couldn't hire AOC because
Lauren, I mean, we might need someone to like provide examples of bad analysis to our audience.
She did miss that one.
You.
She wasn't alone in missing that one, but yeah.
She wasn't alone.
But that was the weekend before the election, so that's like
amazing. It's amazing. It's so delicious.
10% and a job at TYT.
What I loved about that comment was the elitist attitude and the unearned confidence that elements of the establishment Democrats, like they just display it here and there, and they don't realize how much it turns people off, how much it turns voters off. But anyway,
is it true? Would you guys have hired her?
No, hell no. Are you kidding me? Like what use would she be here? Like
we need good on camera. I don't know.
I don't know. I actually never heard of her until today. Until I read
Oh, not
that.
Lauren. I mean AOC.
Oh, AOC. No.
If she had lost.
Listen,
you guys did hire Nina actually a couple years later.
That's not a bad point.
So Lauren was like,
yeah, no, I mean, look, but at that point we hadn't hired any candidates who had run for office and didn't make it. So
Lauren was prescient.
What was communicated to me in that passage in your book is that they're paying attention to us. They're paying attention to us. They're paying attention to our message. They can't stand us, and I revel in it. I enjoy it. I love it. So. Shout outs to Lauren French. All right, so we're running out of time, but I gotta ask you a few other things real quick about the behind the scenes drama that was going on with Justice Democrats, because apparently AOC had some disagreements in regard to the fundraising necessary for her congressional run. So Waleed Shahid was not so happy about her unwillingness to fundraise, and that actually led to a moment where it seems as though the Justice Democrats kind of abandoned her during her race.
Or she certainly felt that way. So there was this, right, and nobody likes, I think it's actually kind of a feather in her cap to hate the fundraising. The people who like the fundraising tend to be psychos.
Totally, I agree. Totally agree. Yeah.
But yeah, the exchange, the text exchange it's like Waleed is texting AOC like, hey, you're supposed to be doing call time today. Like, I don't see any call time in here. She's like, I've been texting. You're like, you can't text. That's not how it works. And she sends him a screenshot of somebody who gave $250 over text. And Waleed didn't know it, but I learned later. Shortcut was like, you know who that was? That was my wife.
That's amazing.
That gave that $250. And then she tweeted at that time. I went back and noticed it lined up with the day. She's like, consultants, like why won't more working class people run for office? Also consultants, you need to be on the phone 8 hours a day and raise $200,000 from your close network of people.
Terrible.
Like if you don't have a network of people who can open their wallets and give you a couple $100,000, then you're a normal person. And then you can't run, and then they wonder why there's no working class people. Justice Democrats at the end of December 2017 realizes like, instead of 435 new members, we might get blanked and get zero. And so Waleed and some others were making the pitch, we need to go all in just on AOC. Like she's the one that has the best shot to win with the resources that we have. Cory Bush ended up getting cut off.
That's right, yeah.
And for good reason, salty about it for a long time after that. Because a lot of promises were made. And that promises based on a hope and aspiration. It wasn't like they broke promises and stole money. It was like they thought they could build a national movement and get people enthusiastically donating like they did to Bernie Sanders, and that just didn't pan out. And so they had to narrow it down. But before they could finally make that decision, the word went out to all the candidates like, we're not going to be able to support you in the way that we thought we were. And Rachel Lear's the a documentary filmmaker who was following her remembers that that week where she would contemplate, like, do I drop out? Like,
wow.
Can I do this alone? Like, I only went into this because there was this support, and she decides to go for it. And then they turn around and they come and they say, okay, we have decided we're going to be able to go in, like, all in for you. And like Alexandra Rojas of Justice Democrats goes and runs the field. Shroykat helps the operations. Corbyn helps do the press. And for the last like month to 6 weeks, they're all sleeping on couches and working 24/7 with her current team across the finish line. And so, but for a moment there, she definitely thought that they had pulled the plug.
That's amazing. Look, we haven't even scratched the surface of his book, and I guess that's a good thing because we want to encourage you all to go buy it and read it. So thank you for being generous with your time. I wish we could dedicate the whole show to this conversation.
You've got the printed version.
This is, yes, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So check out the book.
That's for you.
There we go. Oh, thank you. I bought your book, but I'm glad to have another copy. The Squad, AOC, and the Hope of a Political Revolution. Definitely check it out. And Ryan, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.